Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, March 9th Penfield Town Board work session. I would like everyone to join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for the record this evening, I'd like to note that all board members are present, and we also have our Director of Planning and Engineering, Mark Valentine, and our Director of Developmental Services, Kerry Arbors. Thank you very much. I just would like to note for the record that we still have several monthly reports out. Please note that these are due by the end of the week, and you know who you are. We have no public hearings this evening, so actually we're going to move right down. Oh, we have minutes, excuse me. Motion to approve the minutes of February 23rd, 2022.
So moved. Second. Oh, I'm sorry. Either one.
All right, I have a motion to approve these by Councilperson Cole, second by Councilperson Draw. Are there any questions or concerns about the minutes? Okay, we are going to do a roll call vote. Sue, okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
Cinti.
Aye. Okay,
Old habits.
Yeah.
all in favor.
Yeah, lot of sorts there.
Now we can move on to action items. Our first action item is a review of the tabled administrative sign approval for 2118 5 Mile Line Road. And Ms. Ivers, would you bring us up to speed?
Yeah, so this signage approval, which is an administrative approval, was before the board. Wanted to have the Historic Preservation Board's input before moving forward. It was reviewed at a previous meeting, and so it's back before this board for the final blessing from the town board. So just an approval acknowledgement or vote from this board is what we're looking for this evening, if you're so inclined. Though you'll be reminded, they did receive the administrative conditional use permit for this business operation.
Right, and Historic Preservation Board is still okay.
They approved it as submitted,
Okay.
correct.
I mean, I see no reason not to approve this. Is everyone in favor of that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the sign?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilperson Cole, second by Councilperson Lee. Roll call vote, please.
Cinti.
Aye.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Action B, conditional use permit application for 2135 5 Mile Line Road. And I believe we have a guest in the audience.
You do.
Please come on up.
One of the principals of the LLC making the application.
Okay, have a seat, please. And Kerry, would you tee this up?
I sure will. So we do now have a complete application with all aspects required to move forward and have the board consider setting a public hearing for adopting a resolution to set the public hearing that would be required before a conditional use permit could be considered or issued by the town board. This is an existing business currently located at 2118 5 Mile Line Road, just across the street diagonally from the proposed site. They're proposing to relocate their business, Acadia CBD, to this an empty space within the plaza. And so because it's a new location, conditional use permits don't stay with the business. They are issued to the business at a specific location. So they need to come back to this board for consideration of that application.
Understood. So before we make any motion to set a public hearing, we find it helpful to just hear a little bit about your plans and learn a little bit more about your business, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay. And just for the record, name and address.
William Cedar, the business address is at 2118 5 Mile Line Road at the Four Corners. I'm one of the principal members of the LLC, which is running Acadia Canaan Kratom. We've been in business now for 3 years at that location, coming very soon. We're in a 400 square foot spot at the present time internally. We have grown from 100 products to over 200 now offering for sale. Literally, we're running out of space, which is good news for us.
It's a nice
We saw the
problem to have.
opportunity. We spoke with the landlord who owns the mini plaza. He's quite excited to get an ongoing business there. He's not quite fond of putting in a new business, which he doesn't think has a track record, but given that we've been in the same locale and we've expanded our business, matter of fact, we opened up our third store in Arundequoit last month. We have another store which we opened up last year on Monroe Avenue, so we are expanding.
What are you looking for in terms of your hours of operation, employees?
They would be identical to what we are now, basically a 10 to 6, 10 to 7 operation. We have expanded our employee base. We now have 3 full-time people and 2 part-time people. And yours truly pitch hits on a regular basis. So we intend to probably expand maybe one more full-time person who would be rotating between the 3 stores. Given that this is a larger unit, we see ample reason to have a larger storage capacity than what we have now. My garage serves as a part-time storage facility for things like shopping bags and cards and paper goods. So my wife will appreciate the move.
Any questions from the town board members?
Well, with your expansion, what did you add to the table? You had the CBD products.
Right. We have added more CBD products. That more have come online in the last 3 years. We've expanded into the kratom area, which is a growing field. More and more physicians are recommending it instead of opiates and hard drugs for their clientele. We have a number of teachers, firemen, policemen who come in regularly and use it. And so we've expanded in that area as well, besides the CBD product line.
Right. When you came in the first time, I remember you saying a lot of it was like online. There wasn't a lot of walk-in traffic.
There wasn't. Now we've got a
Now
lot
you
of
have-
walk-in traffic, and we're doing probably, I would say 6 to 10 orders a day online besides. So we do have quite a jump in actual volume of business that's been taking place.
So for
over the
parking
years.
situation, I mean,
It's tight. The new spot, which we hope will be approved for, has ample parking. There's many spaces in the front as well as in the back of the facility. Ourselves, we could park in the back with no problem at all, and with the 2 people who would be there simultaneously.
And I think you've got that side parking area too, in between the plaza and repartee. Aren't there about 6 or 8 parking spaces along the side?
There are. So there's more than enough ample parking. We never have more than 2 or 3 customers in the store at a given time. It's extremely rare that we would have more than that.
what's the square footage of the new place?
Almost 1,000 square feet. So we would be
That's quite a
doing
bit.
almost 2.5 times in
Yeah.
terms of actual footage. We are in need to remodel because the dress shop was there for many, many years. And it's not quite accommodating for the look that we want to maintain. So we would be doing some extensive interior renovation and design as well as doing some flooring work. Got an ancient carpet in there that is not attractive.
So if an approval was granted, when are you looking to open?
We would like to do so this spring.
Okay.
Earlier the better. We have a contractor online right now ready to jump in and make repairs. We've got an electrician in the wings ready to go. So we've been doing our homework in the hopes that we could move quickly. And the landlord certainly would like to fill the space. Matter of fact, we're meeting with him tomorrow.
Now, just looking at the computer, I'm seeing the sign renderings.
So these are three options that were presented as part of the application. You'll see that those are three distinct variations of potential building-mounted signage. And so I wanted to make sure the board was aware that they did also submit signage options, I think with the understanding that they would give the town board the leeway to help make a selection.
Yeah, if I could just ask, the top one that's displayed there seems, I guess, most similar to what you have today.
It is.
Can you walk us through the changes in the sign wordings and things and what they represent and
Well,
how
the
they're
Canaan
different?
and Kratom, well, Kratom was added to the repertoire of our offerings.
Right.
That signage was approved, not too in the past distant.
Yeah, I think that was added, maybe
Yeah.
after our first approval. I think
Right.
then it changed with
Right.
that addition, yeah.
We did approve, I mean, I didn't vote for that, but it was approved
It was approved,
to have the
right,
kratom on there.
Right.
And so we would keep that in mind, in keeping with the design which are on current signage in the plaza. We don't want to do anything to overreach or be ostentatious in that regard. We want to keep it in that flavor, in that genre.
So Acadia is the business name,
It is.
and Canna represents,
The cannabis part of the CBD, if you will. That's where it's extracted from.
gotcha.
Do your other signs, your other locations also have those
They do.
those signs?
They do.
Okay, because
We try to keep everything uniform. The lighting is the same. We try to keep everything standard. It's my son's design.
Right, you had the CBD before, and then you changed it to
Right, we
kind of, the, okay.
Yeah, there's a picture of,
Yes.
Anything else?
So I was reviewing the commercial lease agreement. I'm assuming that hasn't yet been executed.
We reviewed it with the landlord. He made some changes. His computer broke down yesterday, so we had to wait for him to get that up and running, and that's why we're meeting with him tomorrow. But it will be a standard commercial lease. The terms will be 3 years.
Okay. And any issues anticipated there that might affect your application currently pending?
No,
Okay.
I don't see anything. I've reviewed the lease in detail. We've walked through it together to make any changes that both sides agreed to, so I don't see anything really to get in the way of having it effectuated. So, and he does understand that we really can't make
Right.
a solid move until we get
Until
the
this
green
is
light from you
granted.
folks.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Appreciate that. And I just want to be sure, just because I'm unfamiliar with the term, canna is not cannabis itself,
Right, but the,
derived from.
right. There's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace as to what that is. The cannabis sativa plant, if you will, is the one where the CBD is extracted from, all right? It's not the marijuana part of that genre, all right? This is completely on the other side of that.
And I guess I just want to say, sort of proactively, I don't know what your future plans are as, marijuana has become legal. And frankly, the state has not issued very many guidelines at all.
No, they haven't. We've been doing our homework in that regard. I've been in touch with Mr. Cooney's office, who has somewhat of a handle on it.
And I want to be clear that a conditional use permit would not cover cannabis sales.
Right, and the last time we were here, I was asked the same question as to whether or not that might be in our future. I said, we won't know what that would mean, but we would certainly come back to the board and ask if it was presented to us. I do know that from my research that and looking at other states, it may be just prohibitive. The licensing in some states is $100,000 just to apply.
Right. I just, don't want to mislead you
No.
that would be, a given.
Right.
There's still a lot of legislation to come down the pike. I think that the town board would definitely want to have a discussion about where these places could go, that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
We understand that.
yeah. Any other questions?
No, the signs, though, I don't know, the bottom one I like the best, if we're talking about signs. They all fit within the old Julie's Fashions. and
Yes,
that's
yes.
Nicely, it looks like.
We work with a very good group out of Lexington Ave.
Yeah,
They do a great job.
right. No, it's good.
I'm not up on my leaves, but is that, those leaves represent
The plant.
the plant?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, one of our logos is use plants, not pills.
So that was kind of my thinking also, along with Member Ockenden. You know, it doesn't go specifically towards the special use regulation, but would you be willing to share which option you're leaning towards?
Well, we've had discussions, and given that there's so much uncertainty and there's a lack of real clarity, I mean, from what I understand, that structure might not even be able to house such a business, given that if they use the model going on in other states around us, they want a single-use, standalone facility. And that's why speculators are out there, big money speculators, are going into various towns right now who've opted in and are buying up property just with that in mind. So we're kind of taking a back seat to that and looking around before we make any kind of a jump or a leap of faith. I'm told the original licensing is only going to be 750 permits anyway this year.
Mm-hmm.
Half would be downstate, half would be upstate. You're looking at 10 per county max.
Right.
So the odds are not in good stead for startups.
So you're telling us whether you stayed in your same location or move across the street, you wouldn't have that kind of,
We may not have the capability even applying,
not
given
have to have a standalone, you
what
have to
we're-
buy the whole plaza, right?
Yeah, it's a huge guessing game, and it's really unfair to business people. Some of you are in business, and with no guidelines, everybody's just shooting in the dark. And what you see and have heard out there is a lot of wannabes who are selling illegally right now,
Right.
literally illegally, including in this town.
We know that.
And it's too bad because we really stand by our products. We make sure that they're tested properly. We won't offer anything that is not sustainable. We won't offer anything that either friends of ours or others have tried to make sure that it is effective and certainly cost-based. So we're not going to do anything that's going to destroy our reputation, because that's why we have the need for a larger space, quite frankly. We have good, solid clientele who recommend our products to everybody. And so we want to keep that business model.
Can I ask one other question?
You may.
Maybe we could at the public hearing, but have you reached out to the Flower Barn or Rosie's in that plaza, and you're new, as a new tenant, possibly come in as a tenant?
Yeah, so we were in active conversation with the landlord right now.
Okay, so both, and you've talked,
The landlord now is the owner of Rosie's.
right, is Rosie's, but not the Flower Barn. I was just wondering if,
Right, the flower, no, not.
Yeah, I just wondered. So
Haven't spoken with them,
right,
but we will.
good, okay.
You mentioned that on average, a couple cars at a time would be what employees would probably park out back,
Indeed.
because obviously Rosie's is fortunately doing a nice business. And
Yes.
that parking lot, sometimes it can be hard to even
Yes.
find a spot, and you have to go across the street or something.
Right, right. I don't see it as a competitive issue, quite
Gotcha.
frankly.
Anything else? All right, so I would entertain a motion to set a public hearing for this application.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilperson Ockenden, seconded by Councilperson Cole to set a public hearing for the conditional use permit application for 2135 5 Mile Line Road. If there are no comments or questions, we can have a roll call vote.
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw.
Aye.
Lee, I'm
Aye.
sorry, Cole,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Thank you. All right.
And I'll work with Ms. Ivers to make sure that all of the paperwork's in.
Right, my next comment was going to be that she would take you through the process from here on in.
Very well.
And if you have any questions, you can reach out to her anytime.
We will. Thank you for your time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for coming.
Right, moving on to action item C. Follow-up discussion on public hearing for 1385 Empire Boulevard, special use permit for a dance studio.
So this is the application, the public hearing. There's one comment/question that was raised that was addressed. It was related to the property's location or proximity to the floodplain. It's outside of the flood zone. And so wanted to talk with you about the application. I will put onto the, nope, that's the wrong file. Bear with me for a moment. So this is the landscape and lighting plan. I will zoom in here so you can see a little bit more of the detail. This was not forwarded on to our landscape architect, Bruce, for review or consideration. I didn't know if the board wanted to do that. I will share with you that one of the comments from planning and engineering was the requirement or need for additional detail related to the seed mix that's proposed for the bioretention area. I'm looking to the engineer to make sure I'm using the correct terminology. So they did provide a detailed spec sheet. It was included in the packet of materials that was updated and sent to the board. They do have a table that outlines what's being proposed. Didn't know if you had any issues or concerns or would want any feedback or had any thoughts yourself about the planting proposed for the site. And then I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the change in the elevation. What was originally submitted as an overhead door was changed to essentially French-style doors. I just want to make sure that you all noted that change from initial submission to resubmission.
I certainly think the French doors are an improvement on the design rather than an overhead door. I'm just really curious about where this is at with PRC. Are you feeling like these issues are being worked out?
Yeah, I think
Is this ready for a decision?
I think we have some minor technical comments that are left. I think on the plan, there was a pipe that wasn't, the slope of the pipe wasn't labeled. That's a downspout leader from the building. We noted the need for landscaping within the biofilter area, so they'll have to show, what the planting is for that. Most of those, are minor technical items. We don't have any wholesale issues, with the project. So if the board, was ready to move ahead on it, most of those items we take care of in the pre-Mylars after the board's approval, the resolution, and then, as they're cleaning up, minor things, signature lines, that stuff on the plans, we can, those kind of post-approval items, and then obviously, those be predicated on my signature, Director of Developmental Services, and then the supervisor signing to make sure that all of those items are incorporated before, the final sign-off on the.
Right, I mean, if
on the
we were
plans.
to approve this, it would be with those
Yeah, with those items,
conditions,
and
right?
PRC's comments incorporated, but I'd say that
Okay.
we don't have any wholesale issues that at this point saying that it's a non-buildable project. We've got major issues, major drainage concerns.
No deal breakers.
No deal breakers on our end.
Okay.
So if we go ahead to say we set the resolution, will you have all that information to?
So what we would do is we
For you?
would provide a fairly generic condition that the final plans be approved and before a town signature, that they meet all of the PRC comments and address all engineering issues and receives the town engineer's
Right.
literal stamp of approval, in this case, signature of approval. So that's a fairly common condition. We'll make sure that that's really clearly worded.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Any other
Can I
comments?
ask a question?
Yes.
So if we don't have, you said that Mr. Bruce has not looked at that, the landscape plans, then do we just, is it just then approved through you, the planning department?
Yeah, I mean,
Decides
it's the
to look at
board's
those-
discretion. I mean, similarly with the planning board, sometimes the board wants input from our landscape consultant. Other times the board's comfortable with what's shown. location of the building, what's involved with it. So it's, similar to architectural review. If the board is comfortable with this building, it doesn't need to go to a consultant, but we always put it out there. It's the option of the board. If they want further review or scrutiny on it, if they're saying, you're comfortable overall with it, we'll work with the applicant to handle what's needed in the biofilter area, make sure that's done. But just wanted to float that out there that
That's fine
if
with
that
me.
was the board's.
If you're confident in those I mean, I don't know what all those plantings are, as a,
I have a general
layperson.
understanding. I'm
Yeah.
not putting myself out there as a landscape expert, so we always offer that up if you want them to look at that. We obviously make sure and had comments that they would have foundation plantings around the building. I don't think those were originally included, so those were added.
Yeah.
We added comments about having trees along the entrance drive to kind of buffer the building as you're coming in. There is existing vegetation in the front.
Right.
As you go down Empire Boulevard, there is screening there, so we didn't feel there was any additional need for screening in the front, but around the building just to kind of
Soften the,
set it into the landscape. But if you've ever seen a house without landscaping or a business around it, it just kind of seems stark and just kind of sitting on the land. So we did offer comments to that.
Speaking for myself, I'm very comfortable with the landscaping plan and what you've developed in PRC. So I don't feel the need to ask Mr. Zaretsky, defer to the board, of course.
that's fine. You guys have looked at it enough? Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I just have one additional, and Mark or Kerry. The one thing that's jumped out at me as I've looked at this the few times it's come before us is the location of the driveway itself in relation to Empire Boulevard. And I realize there's an elevation change, right, from where the proposed building is to maybe the access road that goes to the back business. Any concerns with its proximity to Empire? If cars were trying to turn in and say cars were trying to leave, where somebody might stop short and the cars behind them, we all know Empire Boulevard and the speeds that we have to deal with there. Any concerns that have been reviewed or discussed about it?
That's this property. I think it's kind of a low traffic generator. We've never had concerns, at least listed from them in the past, about people entering, exiting. I think they've benefited being across from the new Water's Edge. There is a turn pocket for that, so I think they've benefited some from that turn pockets out there. But we've got a concern from a lot of properties. This one I haven't heard from.
Yeah, I didn't know if the dance studio is like a sporting group where they all arrive at the same time and they all leave at the same time.
And they may, but obviously this sits off the road enough that you've got enough stacking on their property that if people need to wait to get in or out, there's enough room, one, to get off the road, or two, I don't feel like you're
So
right on the shoulder.
you don't expect there to be cars backed up from the businesses or what's going on deeper in the property, waiting to get out on the Empire, causing incoming traffic to have to react?
Yeah, and that entrance is wide enough. It's quite a wide entrance, and if there was backup, they've got enough in their property. Similar to we look at all traffic, we'd rather have the backup in the plaza or in the business. You're waiting there than somebody to stop on Empire Boulevard to turn in. So we always want to make sure as you pull into Wegmans, as you pull in any property, you want to have it free flow in, get people off the main access drive. And if there is a chance they have to wait inside, they're in a protected space, while you wait to have a gap on Empire Boulevard and then pull out.
I guess it was the traveling from the west coming north, I guess, depends which way you look at it. That was where my biggest concern was, not so much coming down the hill from,
I think
Plank side, but more coming from the Irondequoit side.
Yeah, I think they have a wide enough entrance there. I think there's, enough room they could turn in, and also have exiting. So if there was a queue of cars waiting to exit, you'd still have enough space. We can work with them to make sure they stripe that properly so people orient themselves in the right
All right, thank you.
locations.
one of the other things we could look at as well, as far as folks exiting the dance studio, so they realize that they're not the only game in town. We might look at adding a stop sign or a stop bar on the pavement here so that folks leaving the dance studio know to check, make sure no one's leaving the storage facility before they make their attempt to exit onto Empire Boulevard. So that's a great comment.
That's a good idea.
We'll take a look at that.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, I would entertain a motion. It looks like we're in agreement that this could be approved, so we could set a resolution to approve this business if you are inclined.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilperson Lee, second from Councilperson Cole to develop a resolution to approve this business.
Excellent. This will be, in this district, it's the references to the special use permit.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Roll call vote?
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Action item D, and it's Mr. Valentine that's up. Sidewalk waiver request for the Arbors at Penfield.
Thank you. So this is a current pending application before the planning board. So this is one of the properties in the mixed-use district. So this is under Phase 1 is the northwest corner of Atlantic and Route 250. Kerry's pulling up the site plan for it. So as part of their overall development in meeting the intent of the mixed-use district, they're adding bike paths, multi-use paths around the property. So as we pull up, there's sidewalks. So this shows the overall development many phases later. So this is not Phase 1, but showing the overall development. So you're looking at your screen. The left side is Atlantic Avenue, so it's a little northeast to the right. So Atlantic Avenue's on the left side. Route 250 is running parallel to the bottom of the TV. So as part of Phase 1 is kind of the frontage units, and they're kind of shaded in. It's a little hard to see here, but so you've got the shaded in units there, and then the piece along Atlantic Avenue. So as the planning board is reviewing this, they're looking at the multi-use path, the path that goes around the entire property, and you can see it going around the perimeter is almost 2 miles of path in there. So it'll be a paved 10-foot wide pathway that goes around it. There are sidewalks internal, there's sidewalks on all the main streets. They're just not showing a distinct sidewalk right on 250 and right on Atlantic Avenue. So they are making the case that the paved pathway is meeting the same intent. So having a sidewalk and then having a parallel path right to it, that action of a sidewalk waiver falls to this board. So this is your first time seeing it. I put it as an action item if you're willing, able, wanted to make a decision tonight, but can also provide additional information to it.
Okay,
PRC.
that doesn't make any sense to me. Did you talk about it at PRC?
We did talk about it at PRC. PRC is supportive given some additional modifications to it. So right now, as you look at it and once it's up.
This is a better quality.
Yes, if you can zoom in along the 250 side just so you can see the wide pathway, you can see the shaded units are part of Phase 1. They're showing their pathway that runs parallel with 250, similar as to a sidewalk would. So if you're walking up 250, you could walk on this path. It is a public path. It is not on private property. One of the PRC's suggestions is if this was to be granted would be a connection back to 250, so you don't have to go down to their entrance and in. At either end, you would have a connection back to the shoulder of the road. So if I'm walking up 250, riding my bicycle on 250, I could then connect in at the end. So if you go to either side by the stormwater management facility, they would have a return, that comes
And they
back to the.
I'm sorry, and they also, I think, talked about a potential extension of this to connect out to 250 as well.
Yeah, so there'd be connection points, and then as well as down by the stormwater management facility, it would come down to the road, so you'd have a loop that would connect there, or right where the building Zone A is. So if you're walking along 250, get off the shoulder, you walk along this pathway, you walk to the north, you walk back to the shoulder of 250, and then continue on. So they're basically saying they're not putting a sidewalk in the right-of-way along that edge. You can see where the dashed line is about where the sidewalk would go. And then if you go on Atlantic Avenue side, so you can see where the dashed line is where the sidewalk is. If you go on the west side, you can see where the dashed line is. You'd have a paved path 10 feet wide that's 10 feet away from a sidewalk running parallel to that. So some of their claim is redundancy, having two paths right next to each other.
Have we
What's
ever
the
done this
intent?
before, though?
Well, mixed use is,
Mixed use
we've never
is
done
completely
we've never
different.
done mixed use before, so this is all new. And understand, I did put it as an action item tonight. Also understand we can show some additional mock-ups of what this may look like, give the board some time to consider it.
Yeah,
But just did wanted to put it out there. It's pending before the planning board. It's no immediate need decision on it. But just since that one action of sidewalk waiver falls under this board's purview, the planning board is still under review. There's still, lots of review to be done, so it's not an imminent
Right.
decision that's needed this evening.
So, and I know you and I have had a discussion, and now that I'm sort of letting it have some soak time, I'm finding that I need to have even more soak time.
Of course.
I would love to see some sort of a highlight or rendering of how that's connecting.
And we can show what PRC's thought was on how that may, fit into that. Obviously, they haven't changed the plans pending, what this board's thoughts are. But I could see a path coming off there and then down that Zone A and then connecting back along the shoulder. Because if I'm walking on 250, I've got to walk all the way down to the driveway entrance, into the property, over, and then back down. To me, that's not meeting the intent. If they
Yeah.
can bring it closer to the shoulder, I can come off of 250, go on, whether biking, walking on that pathway, connect in, run parallel with the road, then back to the shoulder and on 250.
There's a big change of grade, though, right there, too.
Yeah.
They've got to grade the whole property.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
currently, yes, there is some change of grade as they get into this whole development. They're going to level all that out, and they're going to bring it closer to the road. There's a pond there, so there could be a nice walk around the pond. And
Yep.
So the piece on 250, it seems close, it seems more doable, because it's more where the sidewalk actually would be
Yeah.
if they were putting a sidewalk. It's when you turn the corner onto Atlantic is where it gets a little, it's hard to understand, what.
Yeah, now Atlantic, you can see the pathway, Kerry's showing the end of it, so that's the pathway right now, so they're showing it about, maybe 15 to 20 feet away from where the sidewalk would go. You'd look, the sidewalk would be where the dark black
Right.
dashed line is, that's the property line. So the sidewalk would go there, and then you'd have a 10-foot wide paved asphalt path that runs parallel to that down the road. So it's looking at, are they meeting the same function? Is there a need to have two pathways right next to each other? Is there modifications that can make that work? So happy to sketch up or highlight to kind of make that stand out and kind of
Yeah.
highlight
Yes.
what
That would be helpful, I think.
what PRC's thoughts are, but just wanted to kind of introduce it to the board tonight. Wanted to put on the agenda just to kind of give you some.
Right, something totally different than we've
Yep,
ever seen.
and so say, have we done this before? No, we haven't, because PRC is new to the town. We're working through those right now, and
I just want to make sure that public has access to all of this.
and I think that's, for us, is whether the waiver's granted or not, having as much public access to get into the property, make it feel as welcoming as can be, that it doesn't feel like that's a standalone,
Right.
private, gated community. There is public access and intent, as Kerry's highlighting.
Is
That's
dedicated,
That's going to be a dedicated road. They're proposing to come down the middle, and then you get into mixed use. They've got vertical mixed use, so you
Yeah.
kind of have a street of, village-type setting in the middle, where it says Atlantic Center.
this is also, there's the,
That's also proposed to be a dedicated road there. The Lot 2, there's a gazebo in the middle with a green, like a central kind of a community green on that, and then businesses around the outside of that. So
Yeah, I just want to be clear that mixed use is not a gated community.
nope, and that's part of the conversation is this pathway would be open to anybody in the public. We're looking at, this is kind of on the northern end, is this develops, the pathway would ideally go all the way down to the YMCA, could come over here to the town hall. We're only one parcel short of, crossing the gun club frontage to get over here, so that, if you and your family wanted to walk, bike, you lived here, you could walk over to the town hall, go to, the outdoor music, for an evening event, go to a baseball game, watch your kids walk, bike back home, use the pathways and
yeah, as somebody who used to practice biking for an event, and I biked up 250 to Webster, I would welcome a little jaunt off of 250.
And then there's going to be businesses in there and commercial activities as well that are, again, open to the public. So if you wanted to go to a restaurant, you wanted to go to a coffee shop, whatever,
Right.
you can
So
walk there.
if we did, I'm not going to do it tonight or anything, but if we did grant something like this, the waiver, so the monies that would have paid for that are going to be in the fund, the sidewalk fund, they would go back into it, right?
And that's one
Or
of the
maybe
things we
somewhere around that area.
kind of have to talk about is,
Yeah.
normally our waivers are per lot. So I think that's something that this board's going to have to talk about, and that's something
Right.
maybe the PRC can weigh ahead of time.
Yes.
Because normally the waivers are set up for one commercial property, one residential property, so it's per lot. This is going to have one big lot, so if you're
Right.
granted a waiver over the one big lot, they'd pay $10,000 as part of
Right.
a commercial rate. So maybe that's something we can put together, some
Yeah. That'd be appreciated, yeah.
draft ideas for the board to consider.
Any other comments by the board? So I'm always open about the fact that I have concerns about mixed-use development in general, so I would like to take my time with this.
Of course.
And if it's okay with the board, we can table this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I move to table this.
I'll second that, yeah.
Motion to table by Councilperson Cole, second by Councilperson Draw, and all in favor, well, actually, roll call vote.
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
Lee. Lee?
I'm thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I will vote yes to table.
Okay, and Ockenden?
Aye.
5 ayes.
And if we could, it would be very helpful to see sort of a highlighted rendering of how
Definitely,
that's
yeah,
going
and
to
I'll-
connect. It's very difficult when it's all monochromatic.
I understand that, and we'll highlight something ahead of the next meeting, give it to the board ahead of time, so you have an opportunity to take a look at that, and then if you have further
Yeah.
questions, we'll
I just
discuss
want to
them.
proceed really carefully because it's the first time and we have to get it right.
And that's why we've brought it, I'll say, earlier on, and it's in the process. It's still before the planning board, so there's not a rush. Not looking, again, wasn't looking for an answer, this evening, and didn't want to put the board in that position. We understand this is a large development. The planning board is going through it methodically. They're making sure they, take a close look at it. So just wanted to get it out to this board, float it out, give you an opportunity to look at it, and then, give you due time to render a decision.
Really appreciate that. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, board, for tabling. Action item E, request for easement abandonments at Burger King, 2146 5 Mile Line.
So this is similar, I think I
Oh,
was
I'm
here.
sorry, Fairport 9 Mile.
Yep.
Excuse me.
So this is similar, I was here last month, similar in that we have a new development. So originally this came in as the Krylin Bob Falone development on 250. He had a different business. They had a slightly different layout. We're going all the way through the process, got right up into the point that they actually had equipment on site, was starting construction. COVID hit, they said, we're shutting things down, so they stopped construction. During that period, he sold the property. In the 2 years since then, Burger King came in. Burger King came before this board, got their approvals. Things shifted just slightly enough that the easements that were filed now, we no longer need the old ones that were there. So we have 3. So the one is an access easement in. That covers cross-access through the property. One is over their stormwater management facility, so they've got underground storage. They got stormwater chambers that are under the parking lot. We take the rights to go in and inspect those to make sure those are maintained properly, cleaned out on a semi-annual basis. And then as well as there's a cross-connect that goes to the property to the north. So that was one of the requirements from this board was the cross-connection over to the Trow property, make that connection as part of LUAMP. So since those easements all had shifted, we've got new easements, we've filed the new easements. Just looking for this board to authorize us to abandon those existing 3 easements, and we'll proceed under that action if the board is supportive.
Okay, so this is basically cleaning up some things from last time, making sure that all our easements are in place.
Yep, and we've already have filed the new easements, so we're covered on that end. It's just a matter of cleaning up the old ones that are no longer needed.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns?
No?
All right, and I think then you'd be looking at an
So I
agreement?
I got to do a resolution to abandon for
Abandon,
those if the board wants to move to resolution on it.
Motion, Supervisor Cinti, that we have a request for the easement abandonments there, and we make a resolution for that for the next legislative meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Councilperson Draw, second by Councilperson Ockenden. And if there are no questions or comments, could we have a roll call vote?
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Thank you. That completes our action items, so then we'll move on to informational items. And Ms. Ivers, you are up again.
I am. I'm sorry, I'm taking up the next 3. I do apologize for monopolizing the meeting.
I don't think Mark's disappointed.
You can have it.
I wanted to share with the board so that you had the heads up before it came before you in a formal action, that we're in the process of assembling a consolidated fee schedule for planning board, town board, zoning board, and engineering review fees, application and review fees. And then I've also been working with the planning, zoning, building, code enforcement office and fire marshal's office to consolidate their fee schedule in a format so that there's some uniformity, so that from a development perspective, as new businesses or existing businesses are coming to the town with some review or some improvement that they want to make, that there's a one-stop shopping as far as anything from a development review fee or building and improvement fees. So that each department had their own fee schedules. They didn't live together in one spot. And so we're taking an opportunity to consolidate them. We're also taking this opportunity, since it's been several years across the board for all of our fee schedules that they haven't really been looked at, to see how we compare to other towns, communities, and that we're keeping up and that we aren't too far ahead or too far behind what other communities are charging. And we have discovered a couple of places where some updates are going to be needed, and so that'll be something that we walk you through with once we have a draft that's in sort of what staff would consider pretty close to final draft form to present to the board. And I just wanted you to all be aware of that, so that when you get a new fee schedule, you don't know like where it came from. It's one of those things where I think each department had ideas about things that should be either improved or clarified or maybe changed. And then the sidewalk waiver is a great example. So thinking about ways to sort of, as new development types, how do you adjust for that? Engineering fees right now are based on square footage of a new building. Well, we do engineering analysis for other types of projects. So how do we capture that in the fee schedule? And so it's been a good opportunity just to sort of get everybody on the same page and make sure we're somewhat consistent.
I definitely appreciate your fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any questions for Kerry?
Great idea. We need to do that.
Okay.
Great.
So thank you. Go ahead.
When we get that, is it going to be accompanied by like some type of market analysis or usual and customary rates?
So if the board would like we do have some comparative analysis for other towns. We certainly have it for some of the application fees that there are no fees currently for Penfield, and other towns collect a fee for certain things. We certainly will have that information. We have comparison analysis for certain fee types that Penfield's rates are significantly lower than other communities in some respects. And in some places, they're very similar, and it's partly a matter of how each town applies those fees or interprets those fees. So sometimes on paper, it might look like another town's cheaper, but they charge differently or they count things differently than from town to town. And every developer will complain to every single town they're in front of to explain that, well, the other towns don't do it this way, and we know differently because we look at their other towns and how they do it. So we can provide that as well.
So long as the methodology is
Absolutely.
evident.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we're
great.
trying not to, And the intent is really to keep up with and be consistent with how other communities are handling certain things. And certainly to make sure that there's some balance or fairness from the different fee types. So residential versus commercial is a good example.
Great, thank you.
It's a very big job. Thank you.
Oh, well, collective team effort, trust me.
I know.
I'm the spreadsheet keeper, but I'm not the spreadsheet filler, so that's
Thank you, Mr.
important to
Valentine.
point out. It's a very big team effort. The next thing that I wanted to talk with you about as a board and maybe get some sense of direction, I know that developing new local law, new town regulations related to transient or short-term rental has been identified as a area of concern or an area of priority to have some legislation or regulations here at the town level in Penfield. Other towns in Monroe County already have these regulations. I've done a quick sort of cross comparison. In looking at those regulations, some communities have just the transient rental, meaning vacation by, rental by owner, Airbnb, those types of occupancies. They're typically not, they can be year-round, but they're, it varies. But they're usually shorter stays. And then there's another category for rental housing, which is long-term, where the property is owned by one party, but it's occupied by a long-term tenant. And some communities have that also included in their local regulations that requires either some kind of a permit or some kind of a registration, some type of an annual, biannual, every 5 years. Some have inspections, some don't. So I just wanted to get a sense from the board members, do you have a preference? Do you want it only to, do you want Penfield's upcoming or proposed legislation to only look at the vacation rental? Do you want it to look at both vacation rental and long-term rental? Or would you like to see something as a draft and then decide from there? I just want to have some sense of, I can include everything, and then we can pare things back if you don't want to include the long-term rental.
So, I mean, and certainly this is a conversation for the board, but I'm feeling most concerned about short-term rental because of PGA next year.
Yes.
Where that's in May of 2023, and then the eclipse in 2024. And I feel like we need to have some things in place to make sure that, we have the town's best interests at heart. So.
Right, that would be the priority, the first round, The second one, sure, it's good to get a second look at how you do the long-term rentals, but the priority is really the Airbnb and the short-term rentals. And exactly what the supervisor said, that's a big concern for coming up next year.
Agree.
Okay, so one of the things, it's, the lovely thing about, in this particular case, we'd probably be looking at adding a new chapter to the town code versus fitting it into an existing chapter. And it could be rental, rental property. And for now, it could be Article 1 is short-term vacation rental or transient vacation rental, however that we use the correct terminology. Every town's done it a little bit differently, but we can look at best practices and take the language that makes the most sense for here. And then if at some point in the future you wanted to take a look at long-term, you'd have the ability to add to that chapter at a future date.
Carrie, will you include what other towns are doing? So
I have a little spreadsheet, a little cheat sheet of what other towns have and what they do and don't regulate.
Really beneficial for us to look and see what our neighbors on either side,
Especially the ones that we can relate to more.
very close to us, Webster,
Sure.
Harrington,
Right.
I think.
I really have to say that Carrie's the master of the spreadsheet. She's really
Wow.
outstanding.
It's the planning nerd in me that.
Sounds like a good plan.
Any other comments for?
No, I just wanted to have a sense of direction from the board. I didn't want to make any assumptions that I had, I want the board to tell me which direction to head in.
So when you consider long-term rental, what are you considering long-term rental?
So long-term means it's like a standard lease, either a 6-month lease or a year lease, where the property is occupied by folks that don't own the property for a long period of time. Yeah. So typically for vacation rental, that's, I think the IRS has a standard, and most of the other towns, there's a minimum, or there's sort of like there's a certain number of days that's set into the regulations.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going with it, was, what's the delineation, what's the differentiation?
Yeah, so I think for the long-term rental, it's, often it's And we want to take a look at that a little bit more closely, because you could pick the 30-day, sort of under 30 days at a time, meaning consecutively rented by the same people. But for seasonal rentals, and here in Rochester, the season could be June, July, and August, because this is the best time to be here. Versus in Florida, I think about my parents. They rent down in Florida from January to April, so they're seasonal renters down there. They're sort of in between. They're not full-time tenants, but they're not a 7-day stay someplace. So I think I'll be looking at the other communities' examples to see how they capture that. They also, from a vacation rental, IRS has a standard where a property owner, under a certain number of days a year, doesn't have to claim the income. And so that might be another way to look at how we differentiate. So there's a lot to take into consideration. And there's also lots of model language out there.
Right. So I guess I'm eager to get this in place
Okay.
before PGA next year.
Yes, and for the local law process, that will include a public hearing. The local law does have to be in final form, or at least final draft form, before a public hearing can be set, so that the public can view the local law at and before the public hearing. And then once changes are allowed to be made at that point, at any point during that review process, but before the board can take action on a local law that's amending the zoning code, or the town code, you have to have the final version of that local law in your hands at least 10 days before you take action. So we'll be mindful of the timeline, but it is going to take several months to navigate the process. I know this board knows that, but in case our viewing members at home understand that it's not going to be an overnight thing, there will be lots of public review and scrutiny for any local law that gets passed.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, the Kerry show continues. I'm so
Yes.
sorry. So the last thing, and actually, Supervisor, you might want to maybe kick the conversation off, or I'm happy to start it, and then you can fill in the blanks.
Sure. So why don't you start it? I'll fill
Okay.
in the blanks, because
So-
you're on a roll now.
I won't stop then. So with the potential future advent of improvements to the Shadow Pines town property, several user groups have come forward and expressed interest in being involved, making donations, potentially participating in some way as development and as these improvements are made. That prompted us to internally to start looking at some standardized agreement language that the town could enter into with a specified user, typically a nonprofit organization. So it's not just anybody, it's a 501(c) type of an organization. The two that really jump to mind would be the disc golf and pickleball. So we're in the process of internal staff with the town attorney preparing some preparing essentially an agreement that sort of states out what the town's roles and responsibilities are, what if any, the types of action or activities that the nonprofit organizations, their role and responsibilities, how any future donations might be handled or addressed. So there's just a very clear understanding of what the town's roles and responsibilities are. People are very eager to help the town, and we have to be very clear with them that there's protocol in place for town can't just let anybody start, making improvements to town-owned land. There's a process that the town has to follow, and so we want to make sure that everybody's very clear about that. So the agreements are being sort of finalized. We're internally and with the town attorney. Once we have that ready, that certainly will be shared with this board. And so for the disc golf, there's initially, I think, some conversation about whether or not that could be donated to the town or purchased by somebody else. But in the best practice would be for the town to move forward with any acquisition of equipment that's needed for a town facility. So what we'll be doing is updating and making a request for new quotes for the disc golf baskets and any other supporting appurtenances that are needed. And
So I think you've said it very well.
Okay.
The only thing that I would add is, right now, for example, you've got disc golf, which they've been playing with that course over the past year, really. And they've had some temporary equipment, the baskets they have to set up. But they're really at a point, and this is a very different animal than, let's say, pickleball, where you're talking about courts and things like that. That's a much different process. But disc golf, they really could look at a permanent basket, instead of temporary. And so we probably want to start thinking about the fact that, they could get up and playing. They've asked the town in the past, before previous administration, to purchase baskets. And I think that cost will come in probably around $9,000. But I think the town could really go forward with deciding whether they want to do that or not. And after they get that quote, that should come back to discussion for the board to act on sooner rather than later.
Okay. And the other thing to remember is that even though the conversation might have been initiated by a specific group who's interested in using those facilities, the disc golf is open to the public, and anybody can use it at any time. And my understanding is that even when there's formal activity happening in the form of a tournament or things, that they're very accustomed, disc golf players are very accustomed to people traversing the course, moving around them and through the spaces. So it's not like if there's a disc golf activity happening that no one can use.
Yeah, nothing
the
shuts
area.
down. It
Nothing
keeps
shuts
going.
down. You just go about your business and keep an eye out for flying discs.
But really, the public can use it if
Oh, yeah.
we were to start moving along with purchasing permanent baskets, whereas right now, it's if you have some to bring in. So again, it's really for the benefit of the entire community.
Absolutely. And there's examples of disc golf, for those of you who have not seen it. Ellison Park has a course. I didn't know, I'm a girl from the Bronx, I had no idea what that was when I went for a hike, and then happened to see people doing it. I was like, oh, that's what those baskets are for, so.
I had a question, Madam Supervisor. Kerry, one of the things I think when the disc golf people came to us, is they talked about having tee boxes or platforms as well. Is that, and I wasn't clear, is that something that they need to have with the baskets, or without they can do the baskets with it first and the tee boxes come later, or the platforms, or whatever it is?
So that's actually something that we'll work with Eric Tate and Tim
Masterson.
Thank you, I was going to stumble on his last name, to figure out the best practice there in terms of it would more than likely be work that could be done by town staff to set the baskets properly. So we'll be looking at that as well. And again, before we move forward with any of that decision, we would have that information for this board to consider.
Okay.
I'm looking for Mark to tell me I'm wrong about something, because
No, I
Mark's
mean,
got the institutional knowledge that I'm lacking.
The baskets are the critical element.
Right. Right.
You have to have the baskets in order to play. And conversations with Andrew Spencer, even as recently as today, there was some conversation, and I didn't have it directly with them, is you could set the baskets first, set some posts, kind of adjust where your tee boxes may be, play it for a year, even see if that makes sense, and then they could adjust it and see what made sense, and then, assign that as where the tee location is where you start from, so you can play without it as long as the baskets are in. They've been working with the Parks Department to kind of clear the fairways, I don't know if they call it that, but clear those areas open and then kind of play with where the tee box may make sense. So that could be even 6 months, a year later, come back and say, okay, it makes sense to be in here, or let's move it over there a little bit, and then formalize those locations at a future date.
The tee box is a concrete pad, is that what?
These ones, I've seen it in a couple of different ways. Some, I've seen locations, they do a concrete pad. The one group that came here was looking to do more of a turf. So you dig a topsoil off, create a 6-inch deep area, fill it with stone, you put a border of 2x4s in it, and then they actually compact that, and then string some turf over the top of it. So you can see visually that it's turf versus the grass, but then it's flush with the ground. So if you have a mower, the mower just go over it. You don't have to trim around each concrete pad. And then if you wanted to move it, it's much easier to move than having a concrete pad as a permanent. Once it's there, it's there. They were talking about possibly having 2 per hole. You'd have, similar to golf, you have an expert or an advanced location, and then you could have a beginner learning spot. So it kind of makes it equal for all level of players.
Thank you.
I'm trying to better understand where the legal review for this is. You had mentioned it's at least being vetted with the town attorney because there was an initial offer for a potential bequest or donation towards the town. And I'm trying to understand, if that's still a possibility, or if there are other forms of possession by a private, the club or whatnot.
Yeah, so in this instance with the disc golf and any other amenity in Shadow Pines, the approach would be that it's all publicly owned, it's all town property, all the items, anything related to activity and the town-owned property would be town equipment. And so then the agreement is really more as far as, so if an organization wanted to coordinate a volunteer like cleanup or something, that there's some policy in place that helps to govern what that might look like. For example, for the pickleball courts, long-term maintenance and annual maintenance would be the responsibility of the town in taking whatever means possible. But if the nonprofit was coordinating some type of an activity on the pickleball courts and they were covered with leaves, that they would have the ability to sweep them up, and they're not going to get in trouble by the town for sweeping leaves away on the court. Does that make sense? Or that if they have access to a storage facility because they have equipment that their group uses on a weekly basis, but they don't want people to have to take the equipment home every day and then bring it back, and they can store it on site, that's covered sort of by that agreement. And a regular occurring user would have to provide their proof of insurance to the town, have that on file every year, similar to in the recreation department. And perhaps Andrew might be able to speak better to this at a future meeting date. But right now, if for use of fields, let's say if there's a regular user of field, they hold liability insurance, they sign the agreement, it's something that's subject to the town board's review and approval. The only reason we haven't shared it externally to the board is I don't want to share something that the town attorney is going to wind up redlining and making changes to.
It's still preliminary, is that right? Okay.
Yes, and nothing would be sent out to any organization until the town board has seen it. So it's being vetted internally just to make sure we haven't forgotten some detail from an operational standpoint as staff. And then Dick is in the process of was in the process of reviewing. I believe he's on vacation now, so I assume he'll resume that review when he returns. And then my hope would be that in a couple of weeks, we'd have something to share with the board as a preliminary sample.
Okay. I don't want to harp on it too much. It's just the issues are kind of conflating in my.
No, and it might be easier to see it in writing and understand sort of maybe what the intent of that agreement is. And it's really just to sort of memorialize the fact that, honestly, this is a town facility. I think just to make sure users, and even if they're regular users or a nonprofit, understand sort of that the town's responsibility is to sort of build it, maintain it, and to the extent that others want to contribute to its enjoyment, that there's an opportunity for that, but there's going to be a process that they have to follow to do so.
Okay. I think I'm just having sticker shock when you said it's $9,000 for a basket.
No, 20 baskets, all of them.
Still, my goodness,
Yeah, they're
considering
metal.
Considering the various projects that we have that might be of a higher priority for the Parks Department, I'm just trying to understand if you have an organization that's willing to donate at least the equipment or the maintenance.
So they still can make the donation to offset the cost, and that's certainly something we're
Okay.
going to welcome.
Okay.
Any donations, I will share, and I know Sticker Shock is from the recreation equipment, $9,000 is a little bit of a drop in the bucket. So another, you can buy benches and, 3 benches or 5 benches, and depending on their construction, and maybe Mark can speak to that too. I get sticker shock when I see the small bathroom, what that goes for. So,
Okay.
I want to just agree with what Candace was saying too, Kerry, and the rest of the board. I know when we listened to the different groups that wanted to use, disc golf being one of them, pickleball being the other, there was maybe an expectation on our part that we would get that they would be, those groups would be wanted to contribute and would be contributing to something, and that's I think the piece that we want to make sure that there's an agreement that a way for them to do that and
Yes.
be a part of it.
absolutely. And that's one of the primary pieces of that agreement, is that it describes that the donations and how they would be received by the town and how they would be set aside for that particular use, so that if I'm if I'm with the disc golf and we decide as a group we want to donate to help the town move forward with a project that may not be able to move forward otherwise, or would help move it along faster, that money isn't going to be diverted to something else within the property. So we just want to make sure there's very clear delineation of how things are happening.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
And I'll stop talking officially for the evening.
Thank you, Kerry.
Famous last words, Kerry. Just kidding.
So you think?
I'm not thanking you for stopping talking. I'm thanking you for
Either is
providing the
okay.
information.
Either is okay. I won't be offended.
So I think that concludes our informational items. And do we have any old business or new business? I did want to shout out, if PCTV put this on my microphone, I really appreciate it. You are always making us laugh with your sense of humor. I don't know if this is to me or to Dan DeLoss at Zoning Board, but I appreciate it. It brought a smile to my face. And if we have no other business, we can declare this meeting adjourned at 8:14. Thank you all, and thank you, PCTV. Thank you, Greg, for your assistance this evening.